What's up, YouTube? This is my first session back in San Francisco after having not played for, I think, about 3 weeks now. I had gone to San Diego to visit my wife's family, and then shortly thereafter was Thanksgiving, in which case we went to her in-laws and spent that with family. Just no time for poker, really. While in San Diego, I did meet up with WTF, who hosts my favorite podcast, Sessions. We did a little interview, which I believe he now has up on his Solicited Advice podcast. I'll put a link down below in the description so you can check that out. And ended up playing a little bit of poker thereafter. We went out to dinner, and then I couldn't get into a game. We played some games at the bar, which was a ton of fun. I put in like an hour session. The game was just pretty awful. Decided to go home. And then a few days later, I went back on my own and played some 5-5 Big O PLO mix. Session was kind of not too many interesting things to talk about. Ended up losing, I think, like 400 in that session. And then just haven't really played any no limit after that. I do have a number of sessions that I have made videos for and haven't put out onto YouTube. And as a result, I've decided that what I wanted to try to do going forward, or at least to experiment with, is put out videos in kind of like a podcast format. Obviously, we'll be on YouTube, so it'd be more like a vlogcast, but just without the graphics for the hand histories. I know that people come to YouTube kind of looking for that. Obviously, that is what this medium is for, but the truth of the matter is I just don't have the time to spend 20 hours on a video with my family. Any free time that I do have, I try to go play poker. So I decided I'm going to try to put this out. Let me know, what you think of this down below. I know it can be kind of hard to follow along the hand histories. Thus, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, make sure that you understand what kind of the boards are and what my hand is repeatedly throughout the video. I understand that people are going to prefer the graphics, but I'd like to know down below in the comments, let me know if you'd prefer, having this or nothing at all, because the chance is that I'm not going to really have the time to put out a regular vlog otherwise. In this way, if I'm playing a session, I can detail it on my drive home, and then I could just quickly put it up on YouTube with minimal editing, which really just suits me particularly well. So let me know what you think of this format. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully you can follow along with the hands. I think I do have a lot to offer regarding hand histories and being able to help in that regard. So hopefully that's better. And in this way you can kind of listen to it on YouTube, as you're passively going throughout your day. You don't actually have to watch anything. And hopefully it should just kind of sharpen your poker game as well if you have to actually visualize what the cards are without actually seeing them. So anyway, let's jump into that session that I played today for the first time after not playing for 3 weeks. So I get to the casino and get seated in a game in which I actually don't recognize too many players at the table. I do recognize a lot of the players in the other games though. One of the first hands that I witness is there's this Asian guy wearing a LinkedIn jacket and a shirt. So obviously I presume that he works there. I think I might have seen him before, once or twice in the casino before, but I just presume he's smart. As to whether he can play or not, that will be seen. The first thing I notice is there's a hand that he plays where he opens pre-flop. Flop comes like 4-4 deuce. He bets, gets called, turns a deuce. The person checks, he bets again, which I think that, this is obviously like a pretty bad range card for him. But, so I just kind of get this feeling like he's kind of spazzy when he bets here twice. Obviously, you could just have some overpairs that think they have the best hand are going to be betting twice. The river's an ace, and now the person who would check call twice leads into him, and he instantly folds. So I just feel like he's kind of a little bit spazzy, and that's my read on the situation. A couple hands later, he opens to 20. I have ace-king on the button. Obviously, I want to be 3-betting. The question is sizing. Generally, I'd like 3x plus, just because I want to go for value. But in this case, I don't really want him to fold. I want to be playing pots in position with this guy. It's generally the read that I get. I make it 60, and it folds back to him, and he quickly calls. Given the speed at which he calls here, my read is that his hand's just not particularly strong. I think that if he had some really strong hands like, jacks plus, he'd give some thought as to whether he wants to end up 4-betting me here. So when he calls, I think he's got just hands that he wants to play, maybe like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 suited, and some pocket pairs. The flop comes jack 8 deuce with 2 clubs. I have the king of clubs. He checks, and I decide that I want to be down betting here. On this particular board of jack 8 deuce, I think that he's just going to be fairly wide. If he has hands like ace queen, I don't want to check back and just look like I have ace king, have to call a turn bet. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but at the same time, I think I just cap myself to not having any particularly strong hands when I check back here. When I bet 40, I don't really love my sizing. I do think that I should probably be betting at least half pot to get some folds from some of just like, hands that are going to have some equity, maybe like just like 6-7 suited, hands that might want to try to take the pot away from me. If he check raises me here, I'm not going to be folding, and I think I might end up getting a check raise from just some particularly goofy hands. So I don't really love my sizing here. But anyway, I bet 40 and he check calls. And the turn is an ace, Yahtzee. So the board now is Jack 8 deuce, turns an offsuit ace. There were 2 clubs on the flop. He checks, and I think about whether I should be betting for value here. I do think that this is just a spot that a lot of pros will check back to look like weak, so that they can either get value on the river when the person leads, or when the person checks again, now they can get them value themselves. So though I don't love that part of it, being that like that's something that everybody always does, it's something that DJF talks about consistently, and it's really true. You'll see a lot of pros will c-bet the flop with ace high, turn an ace, check it back, and then try to go for 2 streets of value. That being said, if I bet this turn, I think it's going to be hard for me to get value unless he does specifically have some draws, like maybe queen 10, king queen, which now picks up a gutter. Maybe I should just be betting for value, something in the neighborhood of like $80, try to eke out a little bit of value from hands like, maybe jack queen, king jack, things like that. Anyway, I decided to check it back just because I don't think I can get much value from his hands. The river is a 10, which I don't particularly love because a lot of hands that could float like king queen, 9-7, just a lot of hands just really make 2 pairs. There's really nothing that I can exactly beat if he bets large for value, but at the same time, like, I should have the best hand here a lot. He ends up going for betting chips, which is something that I was hoping that he would do because I think he is a bit of a spaz. That's just my initial read. He ends up betting 215, which is really large. It's about the size of the pot. I did 3 bets of 60, so that's 120 on the flop. I bet 40, so it's a little bit over pot. I don't know how aware of this he is. So the final board, once again, is Jack 8 deuce with 2 clubs. Turn is an ace, and the river is a 10. I do block king queen for the nuts. As I said, the reason I check back the turn is because I want him to spaz. When he bets this sizing, I think my hand looks a lot like queens or kings, so I shouldn't be calling. But the truth of the matter is, I think when people bet this large, they're just going to have it. I kind of just lean back on what I wanted. I wanted him to bluff the river. I think I'm just too high up in the value range. I call, and we get showed the bad news. He has ace jack for turning top 2. Obviously, if I bet the turn, I could probably just fold once he check raises, because I just don't think that he's going to check raise weak here. This is obviously a very good card for my hand and my range, so when he check raises, I think he's just going to have it. So I'd probably just fold the turn if bet. I'd probably be betting like 80 to 100. Maybe I don't fold. I don't know. I think really the important takeaway here is people just don't really like bomb rivers as bluffs. It's hard to think of what exactly his bluffs could be. Maybe like pocket 9s that block some straights. That being said, I think that hand might just like bet 120, 140, not betting over pot. You generally find that in these like medium to mid, low to medium stakes, that when people are betting this large on the river, they're just not bluffing. It's just not something that people do. This is the truth of the matter. And again, it's hard to think of exactly like what kind of hands he could be turning into bluffs. Like king jack, queen jack, that blocks some straights. I think maybe you try to show it down. As I said, I do deem him like a smart player. I know that he works at a good company. He said he's a data scientist. So I just feel like he could be spazzing here. Getting 2 to 1, I don't know. I go with the call. I don't know how much I love it. Looking back on it, I don't really love it. But anyway, them's the breaks. I call and lose. And, we're right off the bat stuck about a little over 300. Shortly after this hand, there is an open from a reg. He 3 bets a 60. She calls. Flop comes ragged. It goes check, check. Turns an ace. The reg checks, and he checks it back. At this point, I feel like he just drilled that ace because that's what everybody does. The river is a brick. She checks again. She's now checked 3 times. He goes to bet like $60 or $80, then grabs back for a $100 chip and bets like 120, which is like pot. I just think he always just has like an ace here. She ends up tank calling, and he tables ace queen. So yeah, gotta go in and show you again that when people just bet pot, like they're gonna have it. I think that it's meant to look bluffy, right? But like when people bet so big, like they're trying to look like they're bluffing. But the truth of the matter is that they're just not bluffing enough. Especially at these stakes. So yeah, sometimes we can get shown bluffs in these spots. The question is, when getting 2 to 1, are you getting shown bluffs 2/3 of the time? I don't know. It's close. Shortly thereafter, there's a limp. He limps. Player on the button who is like a younger kid. I assume he's good just from like looking at him and what I've noticed him play in maybe this 30 minutes. He opens to I think 35. The limper calls, and now this the guy that worked at LinkedIn asks how much he's playing. Finds out it's 800, and he's like, I should probably raise here, and then ends up just jamming for 800. Goes fold from the button opener, and now the player who limps is thinking. The guy that works at LinkedIn says to him like, if you have a pair, you have the best hand. The guy shows him an ace that folds, and now this guy shows an ace and says like it was probably a good fold. So I assume like maybe he's limping ace jack suited, ace queen, maybe ace king. Maybe he's like trying to limp trap after like being a little bit spazzy. But anyway, from like what I've noticed shortly, it looks like he's an action player, right? Like he likes to play a lot of hands, and so that's kind of like what I'll take going forward from like what I've noticed in this 30 minutes. Now, a hand or two later, this player that works at LinkedIn limps, I think, like under the gun plus 1 or 2. The aforementioned player who opened the button now limps like hijack. I think he's kind of learned his lesson of trying to like isolate this guy. The button limps. I'm in the small blind with Jack 9 of clubs. I decided to make it 45. It's debatable, but I don't think that I haven't really played a hand that's gone to showdown. I think I'm gonna have like a decent image in like this 45 minutes of play. I think my hand's gonna play fine post flop, and I just don't think that this guy that's limping early is again limping some like very good hands. He's obviously played a ton of hands. He's VPIP'd a ton of hands, and it feels like he's playing too many hands. So I think at 45, he now folds, which I thought was pretty interesting. It feels like he's trying to like play a lot of hands. So I'm surprised he folded. The kid who limped like the cutoff calls, and the button calls. So we go 3 ways to a flop of queen deuce deuce with 2 clubs. So I flop a flush and a backdoor, actually straight flush draw, running straight flush draw. I just elect to bet 85, which is about 2/3 pot. The player in the cutoff calls. Now the button makes it 280. So this is a guy, right when I sat down, the first thing I had seen was there's a player who just jammed dark. I think when I sat down, he was saying like, oh, can I do it again? So I see he's putting like his $110 all in dark. The next player to act, which is this player on the button, calls, and he's the only caller. He ends up having, the guy who jammed dark is 10-8 offsuit, and flops like a straight draw, turns a straight, but the guy that called 110, being the first caller, under the gun plus 1, has king 8 suited. So I think he's like fairly like wide. After that hand, he didn't play any other hand. So I don't know if there was like some agreement that they're both going to get it in dark that I might have not heard, or if he's just a loose player. Anyway, so I think that he could have a deuce here, right? Like if he's already called 110 pre with king 8 suited, he could obviously have some like, I don't know, ace deuce, deuce X suited. He has another like 400, 450 left. I'm probably a bit tilted after the ace king hand. I think he's trying to rep a deuce. He could have a deuce, but I elect to just kind of jam it in there pretty quickly, trying to rep having like exactly aces or kings given my pre-flop large sizing. I think he could have some suited connectors with flush draws that are worse than mine. That being said, he could obviously have better flush draws than mine, right? He could have ace X suited, he could have king X suited, maybe like king 10 suited, which would have me in like a world of hurt. I don't really love my play here. It's probably partly just tilt. I think I'm just overthinking the situation, being like, oh yeah, like if I jam here, I'm gonna look super strong. Truth of the matter is, like when he makes it 280 with like 450 left, most people just aren't folding. And like I said, I do think he could have a deuce. The player in the cutoff folds, and now the guy in the button calls pretty quickly. When he calls quickly, I just look to him and jokingly say like, I got queens full, and he goes, oh, that's good. And he shows me ace queen. When he shows me ace queen, I immediately tell him like, I'm just joking, I don't have queens full. The dealer puts out the turn. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it's a club. I make a flush, so I immediately tell him like I made a flush, and the river is some brick. So I table my hand and suck out, getting it in pretty bad. As I said, I don't love how I played this hand. I think I'm just trying to overthink this this player pool, trying to be like, oh yeah, like this guy is trying to rep some hands like a deuce. I'm gonna outplay him. Like no, like people are just gonna have a value hand that they're just not gonna want to fold. I think I'm trying to assign him some like weak flush draws, but I think those hands are probably just going to call in position. So it's just, if I have like an over and a flush draw or like the nut flush draw, I don't think it's bad. But I think it is bad in that in this specific situation, I think he's going to show up with a nut flush draw and be priced into call, in which I'm like fairly dead. Obviously, I didn't expect him to have ace-queen here to be limping the button. He might have even been ace-queen suited, but maybe it's ace-queen offsuit. I did think maybe sometimes he's going to have a hand like queen-jack, queen-10, and maybe fold to the jam. But I've seen that people just don't fold that anyway. Like, I think you should probably be folding ace-queen here when I jam. Like, I'm going to have like aces or kings, and he's going to be like fairly dead. But yeah, people just don't fold. Like, I don't know what I'm trying to really think about here. Like, the reason I play regularly at these stakes is that I know that when people have value hands, which I thought he most likely did, they just don't fold. So like jamming here is pretty suicidal. But thankfully, we had outs and we got there. So even the fish is allowed to get lucky sometimes. Getting it in there, it's like a 30%. Now we're up like maybe like 700 after the hand, or 500, maybe 500, something around that neighborhood. In this next hand, there is a limp in the cutoff. I have ace-king offsuit on the button. I make it 25. The small blind goes to grab chips, and I get like a quick inkling that he like wanted a 3-bet for a second, but I'm not really sure if I like really noticed that. I mean, he went to grab chips, but it looked like he might have been grabbing like raising chips. He calls, and the cutoff calls, which I guess, if you're limping in the cutoff, you're probably not folding to a raise. We go 3 ways to a flop, which comes jack, 6, 7, rainbow. They both check. I think in a 3-way pot, betting here is a little bit suicidal. It's just connected. It's going to make pairs for a lot of hands, like 7-8 suited, 8-9 is going to be a straight draw, 10-9 is a straight draw, gut shot, jack-queen, jack-10, king-jack. It's just a hand that's going to connect on a lot of players' holdings. My best case scenario I think here is maybe hoping one of them has like small blind has ace-queen and the limper has like small pocket pair like 4s, and a c-bet's going to take it down. But I just don't think that happens often enough. So I decided to check it back here with my 2 overs. The turn is a queen bringing a flush draw. Now the small blind bets 25. The cutoff calls 25. This bet of 25 is 1/3 of the pot. I think versus this sizing, we have a clear just call. When he bets this small, like, yeah, sometimes it's just like a jack that wants like know where it's at, like king jack, 10 jack. But it feels like to me like a hand that maybe wants to get raised, that like wants to look like he's weak. Yeah, I don't love raising this spot with like my 2 overs. Like, yeah, let's just call 25. Hope that like all my outs are live. The ace, the king, obviously the 10 to make the nuts. I call. Now when the river peels, I like to just kind of watch the player who's been the aggressive player. In this case, obviously this small blind player. The river peels and he thinks forbidden bet's 110. My initial reaction is like it's just value. Like I just get this feeling, having played for so long, it just feels like it's not a card that's going to be good for my range, and just a card that kind of hits him for value. I look at the board now and notice that it's the king. Ugh, sucks, obviously, because I make top on this like pretty connected board. The player to my right folds, and initially I want to fold. Like, that's my first reaction, right? I thought he had a big hand on the turn when he bets a 3rd pot, and now he's betting river again on a card that makes a lot of value hands, right? Maybe like what I should be thinking about is like turning my hand into a bluff, but that seems a little silly. Like, what am I trying to get 2 pair to fold? Like, people hate like bet folding 2 pair. So anyway, like I said, my initial reaction is just to fold. But I figure, you know what? Let's try to get some live reads. Let's talk to this guy, see if he gives anything away. So I say to him, I'm like, I got a really good hand. I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. I don't think anybody here would be folding it. And he goes, oh, you have ace king? And here's like a word of the wise. Whenever someone like pegs your exact hand, they usually could beat it. Most people don't put you on like a hand that they can't beat. It's just not something people do. Like, people don't just like peg your exact hand or like a good value hand and not be able to beat that. So that's like kind of the first thing. And so I say to him, I'm like, yeah. And he kind of nods his head a little bit. And this is like when all of a sudden I get kind of these like tinglings of him being a little nervous. Like his kind of lip quivers a little bit. He looks a little uneasy immediately as soon as like I affirm that I have ace king. And then he immediately kind of gets like this like big kind of cheesy like fake grin. I've mentioned it before, on my vlog, that when people have like this forced smile when they bet, it's generally a bluff, right? Like they're trying to like be like happy, like, oh yeah, like I've got a good hand. Similar to like the strong means weak, happy means not happy. Like they want you to fold, they want to seem like confident when they're actually not confident. And so I call pretty quickly. Like immediately I just get like these live reads that like, you know, he doesn't actually have that good of a hand. You know, like he could have some missed hearts that want to just go for it, right? Maybe he thinks like this river is like a card that like doesn't make too many good hands that you don't bet flop. I don't know. Anyway, you know, people do a lot of goofy things. You know, it's so I call and we get shown the bad news. He has Jack Queen for turning top 2. Yeah, dumb call on the river. I think I should just go with my initial read that he has value. Trying to get like a read from him on the situation on the river. Like it's hard for him to have just like nothing really, right? Like kind of everything gets there 3 ways. Straights get there. King 10 I think would bet smaller. I don't know. I've seen people do goofy things and bet King 10 big for value here. Like when he bets 2/3, like I don't know. I think he'd be check calling or betting smaller, maybe more like half pot. Yeah, I think the important thing in live poker is just go with your initial read. My initial read was like he had a good value hand, and Ace King just doesn't really beat anything here. So I feel pretty stupid about the situation. Yeah, just when people bomb or bet the hands on the river, they usually just have it, especially like multi-way. Yeah, just fold rivers, guys. Just fold rivers. You know, don't try to bluff me because I'm still obviously a calling station. So don't take this to believe that you can just bet pot in the river. I'm going to fold to you a lot because obviously I still think I'm beating call anyway. But for everybody else out there, you guys should just fold to people more on the rivers. Everyone just has it. People just always have it at these, you know, medium stakes. Yeah, not happy about my call. All right, back home now. Got a couple more hands to recap, so let's try to get through those quickly. I think there's a limp or two. Now, the player who I said earlier made it like 35 and folded to the jam. Seems like a competent player. Makes it 20. I think there's a call on the button. I call in the small blind with pocket 4s. Big blind maybe calls, limper calls. We go 5 ways to a flop, which comes ace, 10, 4, all clubs. So we flop bottom set. Oh yeah, a little bit of a scary board, so we're going to kind of see what exactly happens. Proceed with caution. I check. It checks to the pre-flop raiser, this kid, and he bets 70 into 100. The button folds. I think I have a clear just call with like 3 more players still to act behind me. I don't want to raise, get called behind me, kind of over up my hand. I want to try to keep my range still fairly wide. I call. And now the players behind me fold. We go heads up to a turn, which is a 4. We make quads. Yeah, feels pretty good. Probably not going to be losing this hand. I think still going to have to just continue as a check here. Leading would be pretty strange. And, you know, I think this kid's a good player. I think he could still be barreling fairly wide. If he has ace king, ace queen, he should still be betting for protection. Maybe a hand like pocket kings or pocket queens with a club will now slow down and try to realize equity. Anyway, it goes check, check, and the river is the deuce of clubs, bringing in that flush, the 4 flush. Now there's 4 clubs. We still have quads. Actually, I think on the river, we now lose to 3-5 of clubs, although that would mean that he had to open to 20 with 3-5 of clubs. Pretty unlikely. So now the question is to be betting quads or to check. In my opinion, when he bets this flop 5 ways, he's very likely to have like a club in his hands. Hands like maybe ace king, ace queen of club with a club, ace jack with the jack of clubs, hands for value. Obviously like top set of aces, I think would bet. Hands like maybe pocket kings or pocket queens with a club might bet, although I would expect them to bet smaller. I think specifically pocket kings with the king of clubs is like an okay bet, because he can barrel off multiple streets here, kind of blocking against exactly the nut flush, blocking against ace king for like the strongest of value hands. So yeah, get back to kind of whether I should be betting or checking. If I think that if I bet, my hand's gonna look like a flush, right? So can he call with a hand like just ace king or ace queen without a club? I don't think so. Yep, sometimes he calls, but I think if I'm gonna bet, I'm gonna probably bet fairly large. The pot is now about 250, about 250, something like that. So I'm going to bet, I'm probably going to bet like 160, 170, trying to get called. I don't know if like a hand without a club is going to call that. The hands that I think that he should have for value, like I said, are going to be like ace king, ace queen with a club. The pocket pairs that have a club, like pocket jacks. I think all of those hands are obviously going to be betting when checked to. If he was betting this flop with air, which he probably shouldn't be doing 5 ways, he's going to be betting, I think, this river specifically when check 2. It's a great river to keep bluffing when I check call flop, and now check turn and check river. So I elect to just check, look like I'm weak, hope that he's going to have these value hands like a big club or just have an air ball. Again, the only hands I think I'm missing value from that aren't going to be betting would be like maybe like pocket pairs, like 8s or 9s with a club that would probably call a river bet of like middling size. But I just, to me, it feels like he's going to have air that's going to be betting, which I don't think he has much of. Or like, again, like he's going to have what I think is going to be a pair and a big club when he bets this hand 5 ways. So I check and he bets 110, which looks a lot like value, right? Like he's betting a little under half pot. So I think if I'm going to go for a check raise here, I can go fairly large, because it's going to look bluffy. Like what hands am I going to have here? I think a lot of times when people bet the river for value, they hate folding to raises. It falls very in line with my theory of when people bet for value on the river, they just never fold to raises. That being said, people who raise the river generally aren't bluff raising rivers. Nobody really bluff raises rivers. So I make it 400, and he calls fairly quickly. I'd say within like 10 seconds or less. I table my hand. Obviously, it's good. He says something along the lines of like, oh yeah, no sweat. I just flopped. Like all I had was the nut flush or something like that, or all I had was flop nuts, which sounds kind of crazy. I don't expect him to be betting 70 into 100 here with like the king high flush, and obviously I think that hand would probably just bet turn. So I think it's more likely that maybe he has like the king of clubs, like ace king with the king of clubs, or like pocket kings with the king of clubs. Later on he said that he had kings like 3 times, so that could make a lot of sense here that he has like kings with the king of clubs to be c-betting this flop 5 ways. So yeah, we get a nice little run out for ourselves to win a decent pot. I think after that hand, maybe we're up like 900. In this second to last hand of note, I'm in the big blind with like 4 deuce offsuit. I check my option. We go maybe 5 ways to a flop, which comes queen 7 deuce, checks through. Turn is a 4, I think bringing either 1 flush draw or 2 flush draws. So I make bottom 2, small blind checks. I bet 20 into like 20 or 25. The button calls, and now the small blind player, which is this kid from that previous hand where I made the quads, check raises to 80. What's funny is as this is happening, I get a notification on my phone saying someone in China is trying to log into my Apple ID. So I kind of freak out for a bit because it feels like it could be some phishing scam. So I'm in a little bit of an interesting situation right now because I've got bottom 2 and I'm getting check raised. And kind of dealing with a little bit of a scary situation with what I deem to be a ton of important information on my phone. But like my immediate reaction is like, I don't really beat anything. With bottom 2 here, I think he's going to have 2 pair plus a lot. I think on this draw heavy board, like people tend to lean towards like, oh, it's draw heavy, this guy's going to have a draw. But it's just the other way around. He's going to hope that someone with a draw is going to bet so that he can check raise for value. In my opinion, he's just going to have, like I said, like better 2 pairs out of the small blind. I'm dealing with something important on my phone. I just decided to fold. I feel like I'm beat. And I'm going to have to like hit a 4-outer to try to suck out. And maybe it's not even like a 4-outer. It could be one of those reverse implied odd situations where my 4-outer isn't live and he makes a bigger boat. So I fold, the button calls. The river, one of the flushes gets in there and it goes check, check. And sure enough, he tables queen 7 for flopped top 2. So yeah, pretty nice read. Finally, I'm like sticking to my reads, right? Like, yeah, my initial read immediately was like just folds. Thankfully, I was going through something a little scary, which I was able to change the password on my phone, hopefully successfully, I think. But yeah, stick to your reads. If you've been playing this game for long enough and your initial read is like your beat, just stick to that. Like when you're locked in, just stick to those reads. So I lose a couple of like maybe small pots. Maybe now I'm up like 700. There is a limp from that LinkedIn player, the person that works at LinkedIn. I have ace king of hearts on the button. I make it 25. I think about sizing up a little bit larger, but this is like my standard open after like 1 limp. I tend to open a 20. If there's a limp, I add 5 for each limp. Obviously, I want to get action, so I make it 25. And now the small blind player makes it 120. It's a guy who I actually haven't been. I think he's been there the entire time. He's playing like 1400. I think he won some big hand. I don't exactly know what it was. I just haven't paid much attention to him. But my initial like immediate reaction is like, this guy's got a big hand. He's got a big hand. Like he's not doing this light. He's not trying to like squeeze or get out of line. The player that limped folds, and honestly, I want to just fold. But I'm like, if I'm folding this deep, right? Like I think he's like 1,500 deep. I have him covered. Like if I'm folding ace king suited here in position, like what am I calling with? Only pocket pairs and aces and kings or like whatever, right? So feels like I have to continue, though I really don't want to. I call and we go heads up to a flop, which comes 10-10, 7 with one heart. So we flop like a backdoor flush draw, 2 overs, and he bets 500. What? Yeah. No. So obviously I'm done. I have to fold. Like there's nothing I can do here, right? I have to fold. But immediately, like, I don't quickly do really anything. And I just say to him, I'm like, man, if I jam here, like you have to fold aces, right? Because that's my read of the situation, right? I think he's got jacks plus, but I think he's just going to have what I find here mostly is that people just have like kings, aces, and just, are trying to get you to fold. They're like, they have this super dry board. They don't want to lose a big pot. They're scared. And they're just like, I don't care. I'm betting huge here, which is obviously, as I've mentioned before, really silly because the only action you're going to get is when you're beat. And he goes like, I think he nods or says like, yeah, or something to me, like, yeah, like, of course I have to fold. I think about it for a bit, and though I do think that like if I jam here, like it puts all of his like even if he has aces here, he should be folding, but people just don't. So I want to get spicy because he should fold like his jacks, queens, kings, and aces when I jam here, but people just don't. So I fold, and he shows me pocket queens, which I think is even sillier. I will flat here with aces and kings, facing this large 3-bet sometimes. And I do have some I do have some 10x in my range. Ace 10 suited, 10 jack suited, 10 9 suited. We are deep, so it's not like I can't, pocket 10s, pocket 7s. So his sizing is terrible. Right after the hand, somebody who's probably pretty astute and kind of reads it on my face that I've had a fairly big hand goes, "Do you have pocket kings?" And I just like nod. I'm like, yeah. And the guy's just like, no way. Somebody else is like, no way. And I don't answer anymore at this point. Like I'm not trying to get into some like big discussion about this. And someone's like, oh, I believe he could have had it. And the guy with queens is like, yeah, I think he could have too. And then so I say to him, I'm like, really, you would have called if I jammed? And he's like, yeah, honestly, like I was calling. And then somebody else is like, the LinkedIn guy is like, which I think kind of goes to, man, maybe it doesn't show that he's not that well versed in the game. But he goes like, yeah, like the pot's so big already at that point. Like how can he fold? But like if I jam there, queens are just never good. Like what are you hoping I have? 10-7-7 rainbow or 10-10-7 rainbow. You think I have what, 2 jacks? 2 jacks, I'm just putting in 300 big blinds. But the truth of the matter is, I believe him. I believe that he would have stacked off 300 big blinds here with 2 queens when he 2x's the flop with 2 queens. That's honestly what makes live poker so profitable, is the fact that people do these wonky things. Like, I think his sizing pre-flop is fine. It's just post-flop. Like when he bets 2x on his flop, it's terrible. He's just never getting action from worse. He actually might. I'm a little happy I didn't have kings, because I honestly might have folded that as well. Because my initial like immediate reaction was like his aces or kings. I do think it's like jacks plus, but I don't think it's jacks that often to be betting 2x pot. I think it's just way more likely aces and kings, and I guess sometimes queens. Obviously, sometimes I do believe it is queens. I have ace king suited, so I do block like aces and kings a little bit. You tend to find like guys who are up a bunch just want to win. And on this 10-10-7 board, like they don't really lose anything, right? In a 3-bet pot, at least in their mind. Most people just don't think that you're going to have like a 10 in the situation. So they just want to like overbet and end the hand right there. And then maybe they themselves think like it's going to look bluffy. Maybe I stack off with jacks and queens. But yeah, it kind of goes to show, like, I didn't want to fold pre-flop. Like, I thought he had a big value hand being like, queens plus. Obviously, like, I could have sucked out, but in these situations, like, it's a little bit of a reverse implied odds situation for me to suck out, right? If the flop comes ace high, I don't think he's going to put in a ton of money. Post-flop, king high, same thing. If it comes ace queen high, now I'm the one who's got to, like, put in some money post-flop where he's got a set. So yeah, I don't even remember the hand where he like doubled up on, but like, yeah, it was just like, he was a fairly tight player in my opinion. So I think when he 3-bets here out of the small blind large, yeah, I think we could just kind of let it go. Even though we're high up in our value range, I think it's going to be hard to realize and make like a really strong hand. I think what leaned me towards the call was the fact that it was suited, so that in some situations, like maybe I'm going to make a flush against like his aces or kings and I'm going to win a big pot where he has 300 big blinds. Anyway, so we lose that hand. I think that puts us up like 500. Then I pick up some like small, medium pots thereafter. It's now midnight, and I've got a long day with the kids tomorrow. So I figured just lock it up. I end up booking a $770 win after not having played for like 3 weeks. Feels nice. Like 3/4 of a buy-in. And, back on the saddle. I think played okay. I didn't really do anything special. In fact, the 2 times I called where I thought I was beat, I was beat. I made quads. Like, obviously, like, the hand plays itself. I don't think I actually looking back on it, I actually played pretty bad. Like, there were situations where I felt like I was beat. I did manufacture a couple of small pots that I didn't talk about. Nothing too exciting, but like fairly standard spots where like multi-way gets checked through, and I stab the turn and win, or I stab the turn, get called, and then like bet river and win. So nothing too exciting, but overall, I kind of made some hands, got paid on the hands I made, and paid off in spots. So I probably play like a B- at best. That'll be maybe my new thing. Try to grade like how well I think I played. Probably like a B-. But luckily, made some hands and got paid. So that's all for now. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, regarding this not having the graphics, whether it's easy to follow along what I'm saying, whether you think I need to repeat these board textures a little more often. I think I did it enough. I think these hands were fairly easy to follow along with. Nothing too crazy as far as like what my hand is on these specific boards. But yeah. Anyway, this way I'm going to be able to put out videos significantly faster. All right, thanks for following along, and catch you guys later.